The sun had dipped low behind the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the narrow alleyways and abandoned streets. The evening air was cool and still, carrying with it the quiet hum of the city winding down after another long day. But amidst the peaceful calm of twilight, there was something else, a sound that didn't belong, a sound that cut through the quiet with a tremor of desperation. It was soft at first, almost like a whimper, but it grew louder as the minutes passed. It was the kind of sound that grabbed at your heart, the kind that made you stop in your tracks and look around, wondering where it was coming from. A cry, not of joy, but of need. A cry that seemed to echo off the buildings, bouncing through the empty streets, carrying a weight far heavier than its small size. The source of that cry was no bigger than a bag of flour, but it carried the weight of a tragic story that was only just beginning. A tiny puppy, abandoned, alone, and on the verge of giving up. No collar, no tag, no sign of anything that could explain how it had ended up there. Just a fragile little creature, trembling in the dirt, its fur matted and stained with doubt, blood, and the marks of a long, painful journey. The puppy's eyes were barely open, swollen from infection, and its small body shook uncontrollably. It was a miracle that it was still alive, let alone able to make the faint cry that had somehow caught the attention of a passerby. It was a woman named Emma who, walking home after a long day, had heard the small, pitiful sound. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but when the whimper became more insistent, her heart skipped a beat, and she immediately turned toward the alleyway, following the sound. The moment she laid eyes on the puppy, her stomach dropped. She could see the little creature, tiny, broken, and alone, lying motionless in the corner of the alley. It was a sight that made her knees go weak. The puppy's tiny body was barely moving, its eyes dull and glazed, and it seemed as though it had lost all will to live. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she took a tentative step closer. The puppy was so small, so fragile, it looked like it could shatter at the slightest touch. But there was a spark, a faint glimmer in those eyes, a flicker of life that begged for another chance. Without a second thought, Emma reached down and gently scooped the puppy into her arms. It was so light, so fragile, that it felt like she was holding a piece of the wind. She could feel its ribs through its matted fur, its little heart racing, each beat a reminder that this tiny creature was fighting for survival, for love, for a chance. The moment she held the puppy in her arms, something deep inside her stirred. She couldn't leave it there. She couldn't just walk away and pretend she hadn't heard that cry for help. She knew that no matter what the world had thrown at this puppy, no matter how much pain and abandonment it had suffered, it still had a chance for something better. Emma carefully cradled the puppy against her chest, her fingers gently stroking its dirty fur, as she made her way to the nearest animal shelter. The streets seemed to disappear around her, the sound of her footsteps on the pavement the only thing that grounded her. She had no idea what the puppy's fate would be, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let it face the world alone any longer. As they arrived at the shelter, the staff quickly took the puppy from Emma's arms, rushing it to the back for an examination. The shelter workers were kind, their hands gentle as they assessed the little dog's condition. It wasn't just the external wounds that told the story. It was the way the puppy flinched at every touch, the way its body tensed with fear at the simplest gesture. It had been through something terrible, something that had left scars far deeper than the wounds on its body. The puppy, later named Max, was immediately placed under intensive care. The staff worked tirelessly to stabilize him, cleaning his fur, treating his infections, and providing him with the nourishment he so desperately needed. But no matter how much care the shelter staff provided, Max was still lost. He was a little soul adrift in a world that had already shown him cruelty, and the walls of the shelter, despite their best intentions, weren't enough to heal the wounds inside him. Max needed something more than what the shelter could offer. He needed love. He needed someone who could look beyond the fear and see the puppy he was meant to be. He needed someone to show him that he was worth saving, worth loving, and worth everything that the world could offer. Emma had come to check on the shelter's animals a few times in the weeks after rescuing Maximum. She came because she cared, because she wanted to help in any way she could. But when she saw him again, all the way across the room, she knew something in her heart had shifted. Max was still scared, still skittish, but there was something in his eyes that made her feel a pull, a deep connection that she couldn't ignore. She remembered what it felt like to be scared, to feel alone in a world that didn't seem to care. It was in that moment that she made the decision. She wasn't going to leave Max behind. He deserved more than to be stuck in a shelter. He deserved a family, a home, a chance at a new life. And if she had anything to say about it, he would have one. If you believe in the power of kindness, stay with me until the end of this story, Emma whispered to herself, feeling the weight of the decision pressing against her chest. She had no idea how hard the journey would be or how many obstacles lay ahead. But one thing was certain, she couldn't let Max down. Not now, not ever. And so, with the smallest flicker of hope, she reached out and adopted Max, not knowing just how much her life, and his, was about to change. This is where our story truly begins. Would you believe that a story which starts with such heartbreak and despair could lead to a life filled with love and joy? A life that was, in every way, earned. Stay with me, and I will show you how this puppy, left for dead, found the life he deserved. After Emma made the decision to adopt Max, she found herself stepping into a journey that would test both her patience and her capacity for love. Max wasn't like any dog she'd ever had before. His spirit was fragile, his body even more so. The scars of his past clung to him like a shadow, and with every move he made, it was clear that this was a creature in need of not just food and shelter, but a deep, nurturing care that only time and trust could provide. When Emma first brought him home, she had no idea what to expect. She had been prepared for the joy of adopting a pet, but nothing could have prepared her for the deep, unsettling emptiness in Max's eyes. It was as if he had seen too much of the world to believe in its goodness anymore. He was cautious, afraid to explore the new space, and every time Emma tried to reach out to him, he would pull back, trembling. The first few days in his new home were marked by silence. Max wouldn't bark. He wouldn't whine. He would simply sit in a corner, curled into a tight ball, watching the world around him with wary eyes. Even the simplest things, like the sound of a door opening or the ringing of the phone, sent him into a state of panic. Emma was heartbroken. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she never could have imagined just how deep Max's trauma ran. She began to take small steps to gain his trust. At first, it was just about routine, feeding him, giving him water, and making sure he had a warm place to sleep. But Emma quickly realized that it wasn't enough. Max needed something more, something deeper than just a roof over his head. He needed affection, love, and consistency. But most of all, he needed to know that he was safe. Every night, Emma would sit beside him on the floor, not trying to pet him, not forcing any interaction, but simply being there. She'd let him come to her in his own time. Slowly, very slowly, he started to inch closer. His eyes would soften when she spoke to him in gentle tones. Her voice, soft and steady, was the only thing that seemed to soothe him. But there were setbacks. Max's first days in the house were fraught with moments of deep despair. One evening, Emma had made dinner in the kitchen, and she left the door open for Max to follow her. She didn't want to push him, but it was time to show him that he didn't need to hide. She heard the soft patter of his paws on the floor as he came closer, but just as he reached the threshold of the kitchen, something startled him, a sharp sound from a car horn outside, and in a flash, Max bolted, running frantically to the farthest corner of the house. Emma's heart sank. It was clear that something in his past had conditioned him to be so easily frightened. She stood still for a moment, giving him space. When he was ready, she called out to him softly, her voice a lifeline he could grab onto. Slowly, Max crept from his corner, his body low to the ground, his tail tucked between his legs. Emma's hand remained outstretched, offering him nothing but comfort and patience. It took a full week before Max began to trust the house enough to venture beyond his usual hiding spot. But even then, he would freeze at every unfamiliar noise, every sudden movement. It was as though he could never fully relax. The puppy that once had been so joyful and carefree had been replaced by a dog who was constantly on edge, living in a world full of dangers, even in the safety of his new home. One afternoon, after weeks of gradual progress, Emma decided it was time to take Max for his first walk. She had been waiting for this moment, hoping it would mark a turning point. She leashed him up, speaking to him softly, her words a promise of something better. But the moment they stepped outside, Max froze. His legs became rigid, and his body trembled as he looked around, unsure of this new world. The bustling sounds of the street seemed to overwhelm him, and he was too scared to move. "Come on, Maximum. It's okay. I'm here with you," Emma whispered, trying to coax him forward. But Max just stared ahead, his body trembling as if the outside world was an enemy. It broke Emma's heart. She could feel the weight of his fear, and in that moment, she realized just how much work lay ahead of them both. But Emma was determined. She would not give up on him. She took a deep breath, holding the leash gently and sitting down next to him on the sidewalk. She stayed there for a while, letting Max feel her presence, letting him know that he didn't have to face this world alone. Slowly, after what seemed like hours, Max took his first hesitant steps. Then, after a few minutes, he started to move more confidently. His tail was low, but at least he was moving forward. Emma stayed beside him, her hand resting gently on his back, offering him the strength he needed to face the unknown. They walked for only a few blocks that day, but to Emma, it felt like an accomplishment. Max had taken his first step toward healing, and so had she. But even as Max made progress, there were moments that tested their bond. One afternoon, when Emma had returned home from running errands, she found Max in a state of distress. His body was tense, his eyes wide with fear. He had torn up the couch cushions, dragging them across the room in his frantic attempt to escape something he couldn't even understand. Emma approached him slowly, her heart sinking as she saw the damage. She knelt down beside him, speaking softly, trying to calm him. But Max was panicked, his mind trapped in the memory of being abandoned, left behind by someone he trusted. That night, Emma stayed close, her presence a silent promise that he was safe now. She didn't try to scold him for the destruction, understanding that it was a manifestation of the trauma he had endured. Instead, she sat by his side, speaking softly, offering comfort without judgment. Days turned into weeks, and while there were still many setbacks, Max began to show more signs of progress. He started wagging his tail when Emma came home, and sometimes he would even nuzzle against her hand, seeking affection. He still had moments of fear, moments when he would retreat into his shell, but he was slowly learning to trust again. Max's recovery was not linear. It wasn't a story of constant growth or immediate change. It was a story of small victories and quiet moments. Every time he came out of his shell, every time he took another step toward the world outside, Emma felt the weight of his progress in her heart. She knew the road ahead was still long, but it was a road they would walk together. And in the quiet moments when Max would curl up beside her on the couch, his body no longer trembling in fear, Emma felt the deep bond that had formed between them. It was the bond of two souls who had been through hardship, who had experienced pain and fear, but who had found in each other the strength to heal. But the journey wasn't over. They both had more to face. Max's story, while already filled with moments of heartache and triumph, was only just beginning. Emma knew that, despite everything, this little puppy, this small, scared soul, had the potential to live the life he deserved. She was determined to make sure of it. As the days stretched into weeks, Emma began to see subtle changes in Maximum. The once shy, terrified puppy had started to blossom, though the journey was still slow and uncertain. It was as though a veil had lifted slightly from his eyes. He no longer stared at the world with pure fear, but instead with cautious curiosity. And while his body was still frail, there was a quiet strength beginning to emerge in his demeanor. Max would follow Emma around the house, always just a few steps behind her, never too far out of reach. He was learning to trust, one small gesture at a time. He'd no longer shy away from Emma's hand, though he still didn't seek it out for affection. Instead, he would watch her with the same deep gaze, as if measuring her every movement, trying to figure out if she was truly someone who could be counted on. But then came the moments that reminded Emma how much Max had been through. One evening, as she walked into the living room, she found Max trembling beneath the couch. He had retreated there after hearing a loud bang from the neighbor's house. His body was rigid, his eyes wide with terror. It was as if the trauma of his past had resurfaced in an instant, and he had no control over the fear it triggered. Emma's heart ached. She slowly approached the couch, speaking in the same gentle, soothing tone she had used in the past. "Max, it's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. I'm here." It took several minutes for Max to come out, but he finally did, crawling slowly toward her with a submissive whimper. Emma knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she gently stroked his fur. "You don't have to be afraid," she whispered, though she knew it would take time for him to fully believe her. Max, even in his fearful state, accepted her touch. It was a tiny victory, but a victory nonetheless. Emma knew that these setbacks would come. Healing wasn't linear, and the trauma Max had experienced wasn't something that would just disappear overnight. But she refused to give up. She refused to let him remain in fear. Over the next few weeks, Emma worked tirelessly to help Max overcome his fears. She spent more time desensitizing him to loud noises, taking him on walks to different parts of the neighborhood, and letting him experience the world in a safe and controlled way. She introduced him to new people slowly, never forcing him into situations where he felt overwhelmed. Max's progress was slow but steady. For every 2 steps forward, there was usually 1 step back. He still had moments when he would dart behind the couch or whimper at unfamiliar sounds. But each time, Emma was there, her unwavering presence offering him the comfort he needed to keep moving forward. Then, one morning, something shifted. Emma was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a book, when she felt a soft nudge against her leg. She looked down to find Max standing there, his tail wagging gently. It wasn't the excited wagging of a puppy, but it was enough, a sign that he was beginning to feel more comfortable, more at home. "Good morning, buddy," Emma said softly, her heart swelling with warmth. Max's eyes met his, and for the first time, Emma saw a glimpse of something she hadn't seen before: trust. Not just the trust that came from food or routine, but real, genuine trust, the kind that says, "I believe in you." Emma smiled and reached down, gently running her fingers through his fur. Max leaned into the touch, his body relaxing. This small act of affection was a sign of something more significant. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their journey together. Max was starting to see that the world, though imperfect and sometimes frightening, could also be kind. And he was learning to trust that kindness. But Max still had a long way to go before he could fully embrace his new life. There were moments when he would retreat into himself, when the shadows of his past would overtake him. There were days when he would refuse to eat, or when he would sit in a corner, staring out the window as if he were waiting for something, or someone, to take him away again. It was clear that Max's healing was a process, one that required Emma's constant patience and dedication. There were days when Emma felt discouraged. She wondered if she was doing enough, if Max would ever truly heal from the scars of his past. But then there were moments like the one that happened one Sunday afternoon. Max had been outside in the backyard, sniffing around the garden. Emma had watched him from the window, her heart swelling with pride. He was no longer the broken puppy she had found in that alley. He was becoming a dog, her dog. She stepped outside and called to him softly. Max turned and trotted toward her, his body moving with more confidence than it ever had before. When he reached her, he stopped just in front of her, his tail wagging cautiously but steadily. "Max," Emma said, bending down to his level. She held out her hand, palm open, the way she always had. Max hesitated for only a moment before he stepped closer, his nose brushing against her fingers. Emma's breath caught in her throat, tears threatening to spill over. This moment, this simple act, was everything. It was the culmination of months of hard work, of patience, of trust being built one tiny brick at a time. Max had come so far, and though the road was still long, it was clear that they had both made incredible progress. Emma smiled as she gently ruffled Max's ears, her heart full. He wasn't perfect. He still had fears. He still had moments when his past threatened to overtake him. But now, he had something far more powerful than fear. He had hope. Max's transformation wasn't just about overcoming his past. It was about embracing the possibility of a future that was filled with love, trust, and security. And for the first time in his life, Max could see that future clearly. Despite the overwhelming progress Max had made, there was still a final challenge waiting for him, a test that would push both his courage and his trust to the limit. It came one afternoon when Emma had to leave town for work. It was the first time she would be away for an extended period, and though she had made arrangements for a pet sitter to look after Max, she was anxious. She knew how much Max relied on her, and she wasn't sure how he would handle the separation. The first day without her was difficult for Maximum. He wandered through the house aimlessly, his eyes searching for Emma at every corner. He didn't eat much and barely slept. The pet sitter, a kind woman named Carla, did her best to comfort him, but Max remained distant. He wasn't ready to accept anyone else yet. He wasn't ready to trust anyone but Emma. On the second day, Carla called Emma in a panic. Max hadn't eaten, and he hadn't responded to her attempts to comfort him. Emma's heart broke as she listened to the news. She knew Max was struggling, but she also knew he was strong, stronger than he had been when she first found him. Without hesitation, Emma decided to come home early. She canceled the meetings and rushed back to Max, praying that the bond they had built was enough to help him get through this. When she walked through the door, Max was waiting for her. He hadn't moved from his spot by the window, staring at the door, as though he had been waiting for her return the entire time. His eyes met hers, and for the first time in days, Max's tail began to wag. Slowly, then faster, until he was running toward her, leaping into her arms. "I'm here, Max," Emma whispered, holding him close. "I'm here. You're not alone anymore." In that moment, Max's fear melted away. He knew, deep down, that Emma wasn't going anywhere. She had come back for him, just as she always had. And though Max would continue to struggle with the echoes of his past, he would never face them alone again. Emma was his family now, and together they would face whatever came next, side by side. Max's transformation had been nothing short of miraculous. From the broken, abandoned puppy that Emma had found in that alleyway, trembling and weak, to the confident, joyful dog who now stood by her side, tail wagging with excitement. It had been a journey marked by challenges, setbacks, and moments of pure triumph. But even as the scars of Max's past began to fade, a question remained. Could a puppy who had been abandoned, who had been left for dead, ever fully recover? Could he ever truly feel safe, truly trust again, or was he destined to forever carry the weight of his trauma? Emma had spent every day with him, showing him love, patience, and understanding. But there were still moments when fear would grip Max's heart, when the trauma of his past would resurface like a shadow. Still, Emma never gave up. She never allowed Max to believe that he was alone in the world again. No matter how long it took, no matter how many times he faltered, Emma was there, offering him hope, offering him a future. The real test came one quiet evening, just after the sun had dipped below the horizon, when Max took his first unassisted steps into the world outside the house. Emma had always kept him on a leash during their walks, never wanting to push him too hard, too fast. But on this particular evening, something was different. Max had been standing by the door, looking out at the yard. It wasn't the first time he had stood there, watching the birds flutter around and the wind rustle the leaves in the trees. But tonight, for the first time, Emma noticed that his body language had changed. He no longer seemed hesitant. His tail wasn't tucked between his legs. His posture was relaxed, and his eyes sparkled with a quiet curiosity. Emma opened the door slowly, giving Max the space he needed to make his own decision. She stepped outside onto the porch, watching as Max took a few steps toward the grass. He hesitated for a moment, his nose twitching as he took in the scent of the earth, the flowers, and the cool evening air. Then, without warning, he sprinted across the yard, his paws kicking up dirt as he ran in circles, his face lit up with pure joy. It was a sight Emma had longed for. It was the first time she saw him truly free. He wasn't running from something. He wasn't hiding from the world anymore. He was running toward it, embracing it fully, with a sense of belonging that only a dog who had found his place in the world could understand. Max stopped after a few moments, panting and out of breath. He turned to Emma, his eyes bright and full of excitement. Emma smiled, tears threatening to spill as she watched him, overcome by a wave of emotion. "You did it, Max," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "You finally did it." Max trotted back over to her, his tail wagging furiously. He sat down beside her, resting his head on her lap, his body finally at ease. Emma gently stroked his fur, her hand steady and loving. In that moment, everything that had come before, the uncertainty, the fear, the sleepless nights, faded into the background. What mattered now was the here and now. Max was home. Max was free. Max was happy. That night, as Max lay curled up next to Emma on the couch, there was a peacefulness in the air, a feeling that this was where they were meant to be. Max had finally found a place of safety and love, and Emma knew she would never let that go. But Max's journey didn't end with one simple victory. There were still days when he struggled, when the weight of his past crept back into his mind. On those days, Emma would remind him that he was no longer alone, that he had a family who would protect him and love him, no matter what. In the months that followed, Max's confidence continued to grow. He began to interact more with the world around him, not just cautiously, but with excitement and joy. Emma took him to the park, where he learned to play with other dogs. He chased after balls and frisbees with unbridled enthusiasm, his playful energy infectious to everyone who watched him. People who saw him running and playing couldn't believe that he was the same dog that had been found abandoned in an alley, struggling to survive. And yet, despite his growing happiness, there were still moments that reminded Emma of how far Max had come. On one of their walks, they encountered a group of children playing nearby. Max's ears perked up, and he started to pull toward them, his tail wagging in curiosity. The children approached slowly, offering him treats and speaking to him in gentle voices. Max hesitated at first, his body tense. But as they spoke softly to him, he took a tentative step forward, sniffing their hands before accepting the treat. "Good boy, Max," Emma said, her voice full of encouragement. Max, for the first time, seemed completely relaxed around the children. His trust had deepened, and Emma saw it in the way he interacted with the world now. The fear that had once defined him was no longer his constant companion. Instead, it had been replaced by the joy of simply being alive. Despite the hurdles and setbacks, Max had become the dog Emma had always known he could be. It wasn't a perfect story. There were still moments when he struggled with the remnants of his trauma. But Emma had learned to recognize those moments, to understand the signs of his discomfort, and to reassure him that he was safe. And Max had learned to trust her more deeply than ever before. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Max nestled into Emma's arms, his body warm and relaxed. She ran her fingers through his fur, a sense of peace settling over her. They had both been through so much together, and now, finally, they had arrived at a place where they could just be. For the first time since she found him, Emma truly believed that Max had found the life he deserved. A life where he no longer had to fear abandonment, where he no longer had to face the world alone. A life filled with love, safety, and the kind of joy he had been denied for so long. But the most beautiful part of it all? Max had shown Emma something too. He had reminded her of the incredible power of kindness, the strength that comes from compassion, and the healing that can happen when two souls, broken by the world, come together and help each other heal. Max's journey had been difficult, but it was one filled with hope, a reminder that no matter how broken or lost a soul may feel, there's always the possibility of transformation, of second chances, and of finding love again. It was a lesson that Emma would carry with her forever. And as the two of them sat there, watching the sun set through the window, Emma knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. Max had been given a second chance at life, and he was living it to the fullest, by her side. Max's story isn't just about one puppy who was left for dead and then saved. It's a story about the healing power of love, patience, and second chances. Max came into Emma's life as a broken, abandoned creature, and through their bond, he found his way to a new beginning. But it wasn't just Max who was saved, it was Emma too. Together, they had faced the darkest moments, and together, they had found light. If you've ever experienced a similar journey, or if you've seen the power of kindness transform a life, share your story with us. Your words may be the inspiration someone else needs to take that first step toward healing. Max's journey is a testament to the belief that no one, no matter how broken, is beyond saving. And in the end, the greatest gift we can give someone is the love and hope they need to build a future, one filled with possibility, happiness, and trust. Thank you for following Max's story. This is just one of many stories we share. If you believe in hope and second chances, join our community, subscribe, and together, we'll continue to believe in the power of love and kindness. Max's journey proves it. No matter how dark life may seem, there is always a way forward. All it takes is one person, one moment, to show that love can heal the deepest of wounds. And with that, Max is finally living the life he deserves.